today's meeting is a very special one for us in the Strongly Sustainable Business Model Group. It's approximately our 100th meeting, and it's also our last meeting as we move from being the Strongly Sustainable Business Model Group to becoming the community for flourishing enterprises. So as the graphic at the bottom of the opening slide indicates, we've been the Strongly Sustainable Business Model Group for almost exactly 10 years now. Our first meeting was in January of 2012. And in 2019, we founded the Flourishing Enterprise Institute, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And today we're launching the community for flourishing enterprises, which is the community that's going to be associated with working with the Institute. So today's meeting, we thought it would be good if we could celebrate everything we've managed to do over the last 10 years, and also to introduce ourselves to some new people who are joining us for the first time, and then start to set up for next month's meeting, which is on November the 10th at the same date, time, and virtual location. As I said, celebrating, and the next meeting on November the 10th will be to formally launch CAFE, or the Community for Flourishing Enterprises, and start us on the next part of our journey. If folks in the chat would just like to put in their name, location, organization, and why you're here today, that would be wonderful. And that will give us a sense of who's here. Seeing lots of people putting in their details already. And some old friends and some new folks joining us for the first time, so this is wonderful. Okay, so our agenda today is very simple. We're going to spend most of the 80 odd minutes that we have left celebrating and commemorating the history of the Strongly Sustainable Business Model Group. And then we're going to spend a few minutes towards the end updating you on the path forward and the perspective and the opportunity that we see going forward, and that hopefully you're as excited as we are at what's going to be coming next. So very, very simple agenda. As many of you know, in Canada, it's become normal to do an acknowledgement of our privilege to be where we are today, given that the land that we're on was not originally owned by or managed by or lived on by the settlers. And so this acknowledgement is one that will allow you to think about how this applies to you in your context, wherever you are in the world. So we're privileged to share and live on this sacred land. Nearby lakes, rivers, and sea has supported human beings for thousands of years and is rich in history, knowledge, and tradition. And we're privileged to be the beneficiaries and stewards of all that has come before on behalf of the 7 generations to come and beyond. And we invite you to consider in your place how you honor and respect peoples indigenous to your place, including, of course, you yourselves in many cases. As places around the world are increasingly home to people across the world, we are grateful each of us have the opportunity to be where we are today. So we also like to acknowledge the place that we're all in. So I have a question for you all. Do you know what watershed you're in? Answers in the chat, please. Very good. Okay. So just to let you know where I am, I'm sitting in a watershed of Smalls Creek, which is actually which flows into Lake Ontario. I've been looking for the Indigenous name of it, but it's unfortunately not known to me at this point. So if anybody does know what Smalls Creek is called, that would be great. The lower section, as the photograph shows, was buried due to severe pollution in the early part of the 20th century, but the upper part is still in its wild state, and that's the other photograph there that you can see. It's a lovely walk along the creek that you can take. So it's important to think about how you're dependent on your local watershed, and the most obvious and basic way is that we still rely on gravity and the shape of watersheds to take our sewerage waste, and hopefully it's processed before it goes into the watershed locally. And if you're using the Flourishing Business Canvas, which is one of the tools developed by members of this group, you can think about watersheds as a collection of vital biophysical stocks and solar-powered ecosystem services upon which all life is dependent. So we thought we'd better start this because we have got some new folks here, and also as a reminder for the folks who have been with us for a while, what strong sustainability is and how it's related to flourishing. So let's talk about, first of all, weak sustainability as opposed to strong sustainability. Weak sustainability is perhaps more commonly known as sustainable development. And the basic idea with this is that we're going to grow the economy forever on our finite planet. And the assumption is that innovation and ingenuity can replace anything that we run out of just in time, so that we don't have mass suffering of humanity, and we can continue to grow on the planet forever. And this is the position that classical macroeconomics takes, the study of the large-scale economy, of the scale of regions, countries, and the whole world. Clearly, in this group, we have a problem with this idea and with this assumption. So this is not the same as strong sustainability. Weak sustainability is something different. And in strong sustainability, we are looking to have steady state economies matched to our finite planet's capacity. So we don't want to be drawing down on the interest. We want to only be drawing down on the interest of that's generated by the planet in a given time period. We don't want to be drawing down on the capital from the planet in a given time period. And obviously at the moment we're, I think, coming up to nearly 2 footprints worth of the Earth. So by about the middle of each year, we're actually starting to draw down on the capital of the planet as opposed to using the interest. And what this assumes is that some critical natural capital like soil and water, it can't be replaced and must be conserved. So the idea is that there's no technology that we can invent that is going to replace some of these very basic parts of the natural world. And this is the study of macroecological economics. So these are the economists who understand that the economy is inside society, which is inside the environment. So where does flourishing fit in? Flourishing is a synonym for strong sustainability in our view. And sometimes we say it's sustainability as flourishing. And the definition that we like to use is the one from John Ehrenfeld and Michelle Holliday, both members of this group. That's the possibility that human and all other life can flourish on this planet for 7 generations and beyond, enhancing the integrity, beauty, and regenerative capacity of living communities. So hopefully that's a very fast introduction to strong sustainability and what we're all about. So who are we as a group within that definition of strong sustainability? So we're a global community of practice and research, and also a knowledge mobilization initiative. So we're practitioners, we're people who actually do work in this space of strong sustainability. We're researchers who research areas and move the knowledge frontier forward. And we're also about taking that knowledge and taking those best practices that our members are working on and actually mobilizing those at scale in the world. So if you like, we are microecological economists. In other words, we're focused not at the big scale, the macro scale of the economy, but we're focused at the scale of organizations. And we're looking at those organizations socially, environmentally, and financially. And we're exploring all aspects of the management of flourishing enterprises, both established enterprises and startups. So very much focused on how those organizations are designed, how they're operated in practice. So our purpose has evolved over the 10 years that we've been around. Originally, we were focused on business modeling, as per our name, Strongly Sustainable Business Model Group, and all the research and innovation around that. Later, we expanded our scope to include other tools other than business modeling tools, methods for business modeling, and for other things like measurement and benchmarking, and also practices were added to that list. Again, practices designed to enable the possibility for enterprises to flourish. And we also started working more diligently on applied research that contributes to flourishing enterprises in all aspects. So key activities, we've had our monthly meeting, as was commented earlier. This is around our 100th meeting this month. And all of those meetings are documented on our wiki, which is in the process of evolving, but the old wiki is still there, and you can see all those 100 meetings and what they were all about. We also have recordings of many of them, and I'll give you a link for those later on. So our basic activity was to bring like-minded people together. We wanted a forum where people who were thinking about things beyond weak sustainability in the organizational context could come together and share what they were doing, whether that be practice or whether that be research. And we also wanted to make sure that this group of people were aware of the work that other people were doing in terms of larger initiatives. And I'll talk about those larger initiatives that our members have been working on diligently over the last decade in a moment. So that's who we are. So we're aligned with a larger movement for flourishing enterprises. And these logos that are appearing now are logos of organizations that have either self-declared that they are part of this same movement along with us, or they're organizations we see as acting in alignment with this idea of flourishing enterprises. And this, I have to say, is just a very informal list. We've not done a formal survey to build up our understanding of who the movement for flourishing enterprises consists of, but there are but so you can assume that this is the smaller part of the movement that's out there. And what binds the movement together is the idea that the work we're doing with organizations should be informed by transdisciplinary knowledge that's informed by systems science. It's also informed by the latest ethical frameworks and is also informed by humanity's deep indigenous wisdom. So that's what, in other words, what is practical in the world. So SSBMG, part of a larger movement for flourishing. So I just wanted to highlight a few memorable meetings. I scratched my head a little bit here how to do this without upsetting and offending anybody. So if you don't get mentioned, don't assume that it wasn't memorable. It's just there are 100 and I didn't want to talk about 100. I'm also going to blow my own horn to start with because I was the presenter at the very first meeting where I presented my graduate research, which is the strongly sustainable business model ontology and the canvas, which became the Flourishing Business Canvas and the Toolkit project that many of you are involved with one way or another. Another very memorable meeting was also very early on, where Bob Willard started to ask the question, how would we know a truly sustainable, how would we know a strongly sustainable, a flourishing enterprise if we saw one? And 10 years ago, nobody knew how to answer that question. And so Bob launched a project that was originally called the Gold Standard for Sustainable Business, which became the Future Fit Business Benchmark, which is now being used around the world. Another one, Nancy, I know you're here today, so thank you for joining us here again, Nancy. Nancy's presentation on sustainable value creation and archetypes of sustainable business models was a really important piece of work that we learned about through the group. Another one was Florian Lüdeke-Freund on business model patterns for sustainability. So really useful way of accelerating the design of business models by relying on patterns of ones that are already proven to be sustainable. Petra Kasun-Much presented a couple of times on feminist business and how social justice fits into the idea of flourishing and helps us to design business models that are going to enable more of the stakeholders to flourish in a more comprehensive way. Another one was David Cooperrider. David, the person who came up with the idea of appreciative inquiry based out of Case Western Reserve University in the US. He presented on full spectrum flourishing at the founding forum for the Flourishing Enterprise Institute. And then Simon Robinson on holonomics, a very inclusive and open approach to how you think about and how you execute strategy, design and execute strategy to bring about the possibility for organizations and all of their stakeholders to flourish. And last but not least, Michelle Holliday, her presentation around her book on thrivability being a synonym for flourishing, and how life is embedded in this idea of flourishing and how we need to enhance the possibility for life to thrive and flourish as part of the work that all enterprises do. So there were many more in the 100. All the presentations that we managed to save are in the Google Drive for the group, along with videos for many of the meetings. And we also, as I said, have some text about each meeting on our wiki that you can also access there. So just want to talk a little bit about some of the larger initiatives that our members have been engaged with. So the first one, again, I'm going to blow my own horn, is the Flourishing Enterprise Innovation Toolkit project. This is the one that's bringing the Flourishing Business Canvas to the world. We now also have methodologies for the use of that canvas in existing enterprises to do strategy work, and also to help startups use the canvas, and startup organizations which from the get-go are enabling the possibility for flourishing. Future Fit Business Benchmark, I've already mentioned that benchmark that benchmarks organizations against the science of what true sustainability is all about. We've got Lean for Flourishing, which is the group that is bringing to market programming and courses to help entrepreneurs flourish. Lisbeth is Field Notes from Feminist Entrepreneurs. So this is a feminist take on entrepreneurship and innovation, and a growing community associated with that as well. The Feminist Business Model Canvas is another piece of work. CV Harpile's idea of things that you need to think about in order to take a feminist approach to business. And I should mention, if you look in the feminist literature, one of the goals of feminism is in fact to enable the possibility for flourishing. So they actually use that terminology themselves in that literature. Refocus, which is an organization that's looking to help existing organizations transform to become strongly sustainable. Aim to Flourish, which is working with students around the world to find and tell stories about organizations that are aiming to flourish. We've got the New Business Model Conference series, which has just had its, I believe, 6th meeting virtually, with the 7th coming up for next year. And that has been bringing together all of the researchers and a lot of practitioners in a face-to-face mode until COVID to discuss and explore research and practice around new business models. We've got R3.0, which has been focused on some of the infrastructure that we need to put in place in order for the possibility for flourishing enterprises to be viable in the world. So they've been looking at accounting and reporting and business models and education and many more that I'm sure I could rhyme off. Bill, I know you're here, so hopefully I've done that a little bit of justice. We've also got the International Conference on Sustainable Entrepreneurship, which has had one meeting so far. COVID got in the way of the second one, but I'm sure we'll be back. And that's, as far as we know, the only conference out there that's on sustainable entrepreneurship as opposed to other aspects of entrepreneurship. Enterprise Evolution, which is bringing to market tools and methods and approaches. It's a coalition to bring to it tools and methods and approaches to enable organizations to transform to flourishing. Thrivability, the Thrive Project, which is measuring whether or not business models are in fact strongly sustainable or not, and provides a reporting framework in order to do that. And Morris, hopefully I've done that justice in 30 seconds or less. Most recently, we have the Flourishing Fiction Collab, which is looking to bring art into this world. How do we inspire people's imaginations as to what could be possible in terms of flourishing enterprises through, in this case, science and speculative fiction? We have another number of others, which I won't talk about here, which are, I would say, in the very early stages, or they're ideas where we think there should be initiatives in order to move things forward, where we see that there's a gap in the literature and in the practice. So if folks are interested in exploring any of those, then please let myself or one of the animators know. In terms of our impact, we have now over 2,300 people in our LinkedIn group, and that's an opportunity for all of us to share quickly with like-minded people. We've been advocating flourishing and strong sustainability as a goal for all organizations, and to counterbalance the sustainable development, the weak sustainability narrative. We're a platform for sharing current practice, research, and ideas as they developed, and this is through the 100 meetings that we've had. As I said, this is actually 101, but we won't be too precise. We've also built a network of mutual learning and peer support in this developing field, and we think we're the first and possibly still the only one to be doing that worldwide, focused on strong sustainability on flourishing. And we've brought together new and experienced practitioners with the research community. So we've got a big mixing up of people with different perspectives and different experiences here. And we've been demonstrating the vitality and the values of flourishing in this community. You might say we're the preachers who practice. And all of that has been done with zero advertising, zero budget. It's all been volunteer driven. And the monthly meetings have been the primary activity that we've had over the last 10 years. I also want to take a moment to thank the community animators. These are the folks, these are the volunteers who do the hard work, have done the hard work each month, organizing speakers, doing the advertising, doing the outreach to make sure that everybody is aware of what we're doing and has the opportunity to join the monthly meeting process. So a heartfelt thanks to everybody who helped to animate this community over the past 10 years. So with that, I'm going to be quiet for a moment and let some of our members talk about their perspective on the SSBMG. So we're going to do a number of interviews. The first one is recorded. The others are going to be live. And so I'm going to hand this over to Laura. And let me just make sure, Laura, that you can share your screen here. Okay, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, wonderful. Before I do that, I'm just going to introduce Florian. So Florian couldn't be here with us today. We had a pre-recorded interview and just a short bio or introduction to Florian for those of you who don't know him. Florian Lüdeke-Freund is a professor for corporate sustainability at ESCP Business School, Berlin, Germany, where he holds the chair for corporate sustainability. And Florian's research and teaching deal with corporate sustainability, of course, corporate sustainability management, sustainable entrepreneurship, sustainable business models, and values-based innovation. Without further ado, I will share the interview with Florian. Thanks for joining us, Florian. I'm going to just get this conversation started by asking you a very general and maybe lengthier question, but I'm curious to know, how have the business and sustainability worlds changed since the SSBMG started 10 years ago?
Thanks a lot for this question, Laura, which is of course not easy to answer because we are talking about a decade. And just by the way, it's impressive to see that the SSBMG is still, this community is still active, maybe even more active than ever before. Even though 10 years have passed, and I think it's, because of the great work the SSBMG folks are doing, making sure this community, keeps moving and keeps growing. So congratulations to this, first of all. And then coming back to your question, so I think one thing that is really obvious is that nowadays we can say everybody talks about sustainability. And I think it's maybe because of, the climate change issues. So it really makes the headlines. I would say in the past 1 or 2 years, it became, a key topic in the public discourse and then also in the business world, of course. And I think this was not so much the case 10 years ago. And I think this is kind of a door opener for a more for a broader interest, or for an interest in the broader topic of sustainability, of which climate change is just one aspect. And so what has changed is that from my academic perspective, I'm seeing a growing interest, on the side of business people, to talk to us about, what they can do, regarding sustainability, how companies can make the operations more sustainable, how they can attract, young talent based on, their interest in sustainability topics. And this is now kind of a very normal conversation that we are having these days as academics, that we are approached, by businesses, by businessmen, by entrepreneurs, who would like to learn how to deal with this topic and how to better integrate it into what they are doing. And I think this has intensified in this decade, in the past 10 years.
And so given kind of the increase in popularity on the topic and interest, I'm actually kind of curious about directions for the future. What should we be kind of watching out for? Maybe some pitfalls you can foresee in that increased popularity.
Yeah, let's simply say the sustainability topic, and we know it means so many different things, but the more this sustainability topic becomes popular, the more fuzzy it becomes at the same time. And this might even, lead to rather weak or maybe even shallow understandings of, the sustainability challenges we are facing, we have to deal with. And you can see, it in how some companies react. You nowadays even see that, even tobacco companies, they are advertising their green packages, for their cigarettes, and then they are writing some nonsense about, how organic their cigarettes are, whatever. So, and then you see that some, this might be some consequence of this popularity that people are now trying to, connect it to everything they do. But then not really, thinking about the deeper meaning of what it means, moving towards sustainability means, many things, including fundamental changes in how business is being conducted, fundamental transformations. And so this is what, we academics talk about a lot, but I fully understand that from a practice or from a business perspective, it's hard to connect to this notion of, we need fundamental change, we need fundamental transformations. That's maybe just as an observation. Okay, so coming back to your question about future directions. So there's one, topic that I think is so crucial and is still not, sufficiently considered neither in practice nor in academia, which is the topic or the question of how can we have evidence that tells us that, for example, moving towards greener or towards more socially oriented business models really has an impact. I think in both academia and practice, we are too obsessed with, things like business model innovation, how to come up with new business models, and, what are tools, workshops, what have you, that we can use to come up with better business models. But honestly speaking, we are not really able to, then evaluate or assess whether moving towards these business models really makes a difference. So evidence, you can call it, I don't know, impact assessment, or just the availability of data that tells us, something about how companies' performance, changes. That's what's missing. And then that's what we are trying at the moment, to motivate in academic research, that people care about or think about, how can we come up with this kind of evidence that we need to really be able to say one day, okay, business model X is more sustainable than business model Y.
Right. And in the world of that kind of evaluative piece, can you point to any resources or areas of interest that people who are specifically interested in kind of being more involved? I know there's a lot of students kind of, in this meeting. Where can we go looking to kind of learn more about those challenges and get more involved in that?
So I think there's a lot out there, in the field of sustainability accounting, for example. That, conceptually speaking, so I think, going back to the basics of sustainability accounting and then to the tools that are available in this domain, and then thinking about how to connect it to, for example, things like, business model development, business model innovation, business model implementation. That's one thing that people could do. And then another thing would be to check out what, for example, consulting firms are doing these days. They are supporting companies, for example, with their accounting, with their reporting, with their communications. And I'm pretty sure that, in many of these consulting firms would also be interested in, making this connection between, for example, accounting, reporting, communication, and business models. But this has not been fully developed yet. So, the field of consulting could also be kind of a promising area. Just to mention two approaches.
Yeah, lots of opportunity, it sounds like. And we really appreciate your lens on that. So thank you so much for joining us today. I know we couldn't be here in person, but we really appreciate you kind of sharing your perspectives on how to move forward and how things have changed. It's been really wonderful to have you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Laura, and all the best for the next 10 years. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thanks to Florian for joining us from the past. I'm going to throw Bill Baue into the hot seat. So I'm going to be interviewing Bill, but before that, I'll just give a short introduction to Bill. He's a senior director at R30, the Redesign for Resilience and Regeneration, a non-for-profit common good and network of positive mavericks. Bill is a global expert on sustainability thresholds, thrivability, and online stakeholder engagement. He was an original instigator of the Science-Based Targets Initiative, who has worked with many UN agencies, including the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development. His most recent major writing was the white paper From Monocapitalism to Multicapitalism, 21st Century System Value Creation. Thanks for joining us, Bill.
Thank you, Laura.
So we are kind of exploring, what was and what's kind of, catapulting us into the future. So through the lens of what was, I'm curious to know, how have the business and sustainability worlds changed since the SSBMG started 10 years ago?
Well, it's a great place to start, and I think that we've got, it's sort of a good news and bad news scenario. I'll just note that concurrent with SSBMG starting about a decade ago, 2012 or so, is also when the Sustainability Context Group co-founded. Many of the folks on this call are members of that, and Mark McElroy and I co-founded that in 2012 for many of the same reasons that SSBMG started. Also, R3.0, Ralph Thurm, my main colleague, started that around the same time. And there was a lot of activity happening then, and I would say that activity has both been wildly successful and huge failures. So wildly successful. So nowadays, ESG rolls off of people's tongues. It's got tons of money flowing into it. The notions of sustainability are talked about everywhere. So the concept has moved from being in the niche to being in the mainstream. So that's great news, but this is actually the bad news as well, is that the version of quote unquote sustainability that is now so popular is actually what you could call a facsimile or a cartoon characterization of what sustainability really is. So in the SSBMG language, it would be that basically weak sustainability has won the day, and strong sustainability, or in our terms, context-based sustainability, has actually been almost further sidelined. So this is a sort of a paradoxical situation where we are in some ways a kind of victim of our success, that ESG, which we point out, and in fact we quote Alan White, the co-founder of the Global Reporting Initiative, has said that ESG does not have a sustainability gene in its nature. It's inherently incrementalist, and it essentially, has nothing to do with sustainability other than ESG looks at environmental and social and governance factors. But it doesn't take a normative approach to them. It doesn't essentially, in Bob Willard's language, it doesn't set a goal line, if you will. It just says, hey, let's move down the field in some direction. So in essence, I think, that's where we find ourselves today. And I think what we need to do is kind of flip this situation and leverage the success of the ESG and the quote unquote sustainability world to really start to drive the bona fide sustainability agenda that is necessary to move us towards thrivability and flourishing.
And so in the context of, flipping that script and kind of riding on that, I guess, the success of weak sustainability, if you will, and kind of moving that conversation forward, what specifically, just in your opinion, what new directions might we invite on maybe a personal level, organizational level, and even, wider lens societal level?
Well, I think that we're already moving in that direction. And I think that what folks like us on this call can start to do is really sort of sing the same song, if you will, or songs that harmonize with one another and create more of a kind of network effect. So I think that what we're often caught in the conundrum of is this cheerleading the rise of ESG, while sort of quietly in the back of our mind saying, yeah, but that's not going to get us there. So what we at R3.0 have been doing, and we see others doing this as well, and we invite others on board, is we've been embracing our positive maverick gene. So this is a term that was coined by Raj Thamaratham from the Preventable Surprises, who, if you don't know about Raj, you should. But then we helped to develop that term of positive maverick of, we're not practicing sort of destructive activism, we're practicing constructive, and we would say ethically necessary activism. So we believe that actually the form of sustainability that's being practiced today is ethically suspect. It's not going to get us where we need to be. Therefore, we really need to up the ante. So the more that those of us who are in these conversations can respectfully point out the progress that has been made, but that progress isn't measuring itself against the proper bar or yardstick, if you will. So the more that we can bring out an awareness that we need to actually leapfrog or take a quantum leap beyond the trajectory that we're heading right now with ESG, which won't get us there, if you will. And obviously the stakes are incredibly high. I guess I'll end my answer to this question by quoting my dear friend and an R3.0 steering board member who passed away this last year, Brendan LeBlanc with EY, who used to say that the only thing that's more dangerous than no progress is the illusion of progress.
That's really wonderful. I think given, everything that you've covered, there's a lot to chew on there. And I really appreciate you sharing some of your thoughts with us today. It sounds like there's a lot of work to be done in community, in partnership, with this, between this group and beyond. So thanks for sharing your thoughts, Bill.
Absolutely. Thank you for the great questions, Laura, and thanks to the whole group here.
Wonderful. I'm going to pass the baton to Carrie, who's going to facilitate a couple more interviews for us.
Perfect. Thanks, Laura. So at this point in time, I'd like to introduce Simon Robinson. So with 3 decades of experience in customer experience design, Simon is an internet pioneer and an award-winning innovator, having co-founded British Telecom's Genie Internet, the world's first mobile internet portal, and contributing to the design and launch of the world's first smartphones. He is the CEO worldwide of Holonomics, co-founder of the Deep Tech Network, a Harvard Business Review author, and co-author of Deep Tech and the Amplified Organization, Customer Experiences with Soul, and Holonomics, Business Where People and Planet Matter. Simon is respected globally for his contributions to customer experience strategy and deep tech, having created numerous design methods and frameworks such as the new 4 Ps, and the holonomic circle. So welcome, Simon.
Thanks, Carrie. It's great to be here on this in this new stage of the Strongly Sustainable Business Model Group, or rather saying goodbye to that stage and welcoming in the new.
Wonderful. And so just to start, can you speak a little bit about your experience of the SSBMG?
Yeah, I joined in 2014, and as you mentioned in the introduction, I did a lot of work developing new business models in the 1990s in the first wave of the internet. But it was interesting because in the 1990s, no one really used the term business model. Business model as a phrase comes into business usage after around the year 2000. But it was really great just to have that experience of helping companies go from a non-internet reality to developing internet-based business models and also platforms as well. And I think for me, it's been fantastic being a member of this group, because obviously a lot of us, there's always a lot of pressure to try and keep up with the latest information, the latest trends. It's one thing, you know, reading trend reports from the big consultancies, but here, I've just really appreciated the focus of the group. It's not purely focused on the Flourishing canvas, but I've really appreciated the quality of conversations exploring the context around the Flourishing canvas. So just as Anthony mentioned, that there's been so many great presentations, it's almost impossible to mention all of them. You know, I loved Nicole's discussion about, you know, design and how to really implement it. But then there's also been things that have really helped me, like the feminist aspect of what does a feminist flourishing business model mean? And I'm very aware of that. I think in the last 10 years, I've become much more aware of the challenges of female leadership. My wife, Maria, is a leader in deep tech, but my gosh, is it, you know, it's extremely challenging for a woman to be taken seriously as a technology leader in countries around the world. And also, I really appreciated Florian and Bill's presentations, because I think for me personally, when I think about what I've gained the most, obviously I do have a lot of experience in business model design, but I totally agree one of the big challenges is in indicators. And the interesting thing is that our particular consultancy is a specialist in balanced scorecard. And balanced scorecard started with a systemic perspective. It started with this philosophy of you need more than one perspective. You need more than just a financial perspective on an organization. But if I look to the last 10 years, a consulting kind of trend has been to move to OKRs, objectives and key results. And this has completely removed any kind of systemic understanding of the organization. And for this reason, I really appreciate the conversations we've had with the Flourishing business model, because it's put back this systemic understanding of the impact of an organization. It's taken inspiration from balanced scorecard. And what I've seen now in the last maybe couple of years with our clients, they're now taking systemic strategy far more seriously. Before maybe like 2015, 2016, it's all about agility, OKRs. We don't need to think about the long term, but I'm seeing that come back. And now what we're doing, we're putting the Flourishing canvas and our way of evolving the balanced scorecard back into the heart of strategies. And of course, this also includes the way in which we've also been integrating the Future Fit benchmark, and also insights around the need for context-dependent indicators. It's not just about having an indicator on itself. I think that point's critical. And I agree about the ESG superficiality. I've absolutely been in conversations like that. But for that reason, we created the new 4 Ps. The new 4 Ps framework of platforms, purpose, people and planet is a very deep framework, but it initiates much more meaningful conversations at the C-suite level. And of course, a lot of these conversations, I've taken a lot of inspiration over the years from the conversations we've had with so many interesting people in this group.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for that. And on to the next question. To date, we have focused on the early adopters. Do you believe we should be outreaching to problematic business models such as manufacturing, mining, and healthcare?
Yeah, I've had a week or two to really think about how to answer this. And it's interesting because the phrasing of that question tells me a lot about the mindset of the person and group of people asking the question, because we've actually been working with the Flourishing Canvas in a different way. And so, you know, I made a list of like a lot of the different industries where we've actually already applied the canvas. So we're talking mining, aluminium production, banking, car manufacturing, healthcare, education, beauty and cosmetics, energy, food and beverages, NGOs, clothing and fashion, agriculture, and also technology and design consultancies, who are they themselves are asking, what does regenerative mean in a digital context? So for me, I think I can answer that question by not answering that question. And the way I want to do that is to say, most of the time, how has it been possible to insert the Flourishing Canvas into these particular contexts where, yes, absolutely, a lot of these industries at this moment in time are not flourishing, but I can assure you there are a lot of different people, good people, really asking questions. And although ESG is triggering a level of superficiality, there is space to deepen the conversation. And so a lot of these companies, even companies like aluminium is a wonderful substance, and metal, it is recyclable. By nature, it is regenerative, but not necessarily the manufacturing process. So there's still a lot of work to do to make something like an aluminium manufacturer genuinely future fit. And I think my key point here is that we're now using the Flourishing Business Canvas as a de facto business model canvas. Yeah. So it's the strength of it is that it can be now used in any context. So these companies, these big companies, they don't come to a consultancy to say, we want to talk about designing a new business model. That's pretty much never the case. But it is possible to introduce the canvas as a way to really facilitate strategic conversations. And I think that's the key takeaway. We're using the canvas to facilitate strategic conversations that then opens up a number of different avenues. So we don't often talk about every single aspect of the canvas in one go. But for example, we've created a process called value proposition elevation that really fits hand in hand with the way in which the Flourishing Canvas treats value proposition design. Customer experience, it's now not just about developing a product where you take into account the voice of the customer. This is a design practice that comes from design thinking. No, we talk about designing from the perspective of the voice of the stakeholders. And by little, you can introduce more flourishing and regenerative aspects into the consultancy in a way that is very much respected by senior leadership. And that's how we're doing it, all through our overall framework of the new 4 Ps, to really help companies understand that, no, it's not so much about the marketing mix, which is still relevant. The marketing mix is still absolutely relevant. But nowadays, the key thing is it's not about marketing and branding. It's about business transformation, cultural transformation, digital transformation, and developing a much more regenerative and responsible business, because this is ultimately what stakeholders of every description are responding to. So yeah, to go back to your point, I know a lot of you are already doing great work developing cutting edge, regenerative, flourishing business models using the canvas with some of the most forward-thinking companies. But don't forget that you can have impact with traditional companies or companies that are not traditionally flourishing. And that's where you can often have the greatest impact. because they've got the greatest amount of work to do to evolve.
I think that note will be a great segue into one of the final questions. But in terms of industries, about the ones that you believe need to be included to expand the adoption of sustainability as Flourishing, what can you say about that?
When I look about, one of the things I don't really think we've talked about so much as a group is supply chain and how supply chains are moving. There's a lot of work happening in the digital space, developing supply chains, but we're now seeing a demand to move from the concept of the supply chain to more networked models. And I think this is particularly one area that's quite promising, where you can really do work combining advances and innovation in digital technologies with the need to transform business models. I think this is probably one area that we can definitely see strong advances maybe in the next year or two. And I think this is where, you know, I agree so much with what Bill has said, but where can we really start to have impact, and where can we start to have measurable impact is really rethinking our supply chains. And as we've seen in the UK, especially, wow, people are really starting to understand the impact, because we often say that it's often the case that people can't really embody the challenge of climate change. It's quite difficult for people to really think systemically and understand the real immediate need to react, but people are becoming much more aware of the systemic and intractable problems of our supply chains. And I think this is where we can start to really make progress, not just with industry, but also at the political level as well, at the governmental level.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your insight today, Simon. I want to thank you again for being available to come.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here with everyone, and hopefully we'll have time to open up the conversation, obviously, in a bit.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so at this point in time, I would like to introduce Nicole Norris. Nicole Norris, pronoun she, they, is a reformed creative with 20 years of corporate design experience. Today, she is the manager of the Center for Changemaking and Social Innovation at Georgian College, Canada's first and currently only Ashoka Changemaker College in Ontario, Canada. She is a former SSBMG community animator and an active member of the Flourishing Toolkit First Explorer community. Nicole currently works alongside a team of talented changemakers to inspire and equip students, faculty, and community organizations with the tools and attitudes they need to design social impact into future-fit socioeconomic models. Nicole received her master's in strategic foresight and innovation from OCAD University and believes that the tools that we use to design our future with matter. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. It's a hard act to follow all the other people that were ahead of the game, so we'll try.
Wonderful. So just to start, what has been your experience, and if you could talk about the benefits you've gained from being involved in the SSBMG?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a designer that fell to earth and fell into academia. And so I landed with the SSBMG group as an animator, and I met Anthony and Peter. And one of the benefits that I found from it was I was really, as I said, I had spent many years in the corporate world on the creative side. So, you know, the innovation team that came in, which really was much more of an extrapolation process of creative energy and individuals as opposed to actually real moving things forward. And I found a benefit of a like-minded community. So for me, the network really brought in new thinking, new thought, new relationships. Through the First Explorer group, I was able to complete my master's studies. But more importantly, what it gave to me was to realize I wasn't alone. And there was other people that were doing this work and were seeing the world this way. And what I was able to do with a lot of the connections and the resources and the theories was bring that back to my job here at Georgian College. So just to Just sort of give you a little definition. So Georgian is a college, it's applied learning. So we, a lot of our curriculum is trades-based. We do have some degree granting, but it's more diploma. Our students with us are over 2 years. So it's a little bit of a different zeitgeist in terms of education. And we really focus on the workforce development. And so one of the things that I found by working with the group and being part of the SSBMG is we do a lot of community development work, and that is entrepreneurs coming in, they're looking for support to move their models forward, they're looking for funding, they're looking for students to do co-ops or internships or research with them. And one of the things that I was really sort of starting to cringe about was this idea that, this individualism of entrepreneurship. We were teaching it in our students. As an Ashoka Changemaker campus, Ashoka is a national global organization that looks at social impact and social innovation. We were essentially using the same tools that business was using, but then at the end of the day, we were just saying, oh, and then let's do some good. And so what was really great about that was once in the community starting to really understand this, because there was really no resource to go and get this. And for an entrepreneurial so in terms of the organization at Georgian, one of the things I started to look at was like, well, if we want to sort of imbue these students coming out with these different mindsets, I think we're going to have to turn these tools inward and start to be entrepreneurial. And so how might we move that into the organization now and look at how are we actually incubating these mindsets? And we realized, okay, great. So we want to incubate this social consciousness with our students, Flourishing being a great place to start. Well, you know what? If we want flourishing students, we're going to need to have flourishing faculty. And if we want to have flourishing faculty, we're probably going to have flourishing leaders. And if we want to have flourishing leaders, we're probably going to have a flourishing organization. And so maybe now it's about time that we started to look at how is higher ed contributing to building these infrastructures, these social infrastructures, and maximizing that. So that's a lot of the work that we do. So to answer your question about the experience, it was really great to bring a network of support, a network of peers together, which I could say, like, look, these are some of the challenges we're facing. Who could I go talk to that would have the rigor, the theory, the application, and the tools that I can then go make a pitch and say, in terms of our business model, we need to shift.
Pardon me. Thank you very much.
It's okay. I have that effect on people sometimes.
And the next question I'm going to ask, we've asked a couple of the other interviewees, but your take, I would love to know how have the business and sustainability worlds changed since we've started or since you've been part of the group?
Yeah, so I can comment really only on my sector, which is higher ed. We are seeing a lot of higher education institutions, obviously, particularly during the pandemic, they're moving to more of the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation, the indigenization conversation, a lot more of the, I don't want to use the word decolonization because decolonization has a very specific aspect, but maybe sort of an examination of sort of that neoliberalist context, which we've built everything under. So it's been nice to see that, those voices starting to come in, starting to enter into conversations at a faculty level, at a senior leadership level, and different institutions. Like one of the interesting things that I saw go across the board during the pandemic is everybody's now hiring a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Which is fantastic, but fundamentally, okay, so you put that director in and, it kind of becomes theater now. And so if the institution isn't fully embracing that philosophically, understanding that you are going to have to sort of examine what you measure, all the conversations that all of our, all the interviewees talked about, it's really just going to be performative. And so one of the interesting things that I'm seeing right now is higher ed wrestle, particularly in the college sector, which is applied, wrestle with this idea that the world is changing. Students are demanding, more of a holistic, a community-based, more of a flourishing perspective, and how are codified bureaucratic institutions turning to adapt for that. So it's been really interesting to watch do that. So I don't know if it's necessarily sustainability. Sustainability is part of that, but really it's more of a community, like how are we actually, because we are community connected, what is our role as an intermediary in basically producing flourishing cultures, flourishing economies, and flourishing students. So it's been very interesting to watch how different conversations are happening, and but yet still using the same tools to plan, which is crazy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that insight. I think a lot of people, being in the group, part of academia, is very happy to hear about your higher ed specific lens on that. So thank you. And finally, just kind of moving our focus from the past into the future, what new direction should we be inviting now as a group?
Yeah, I think, and I think Anthony's really hit on that with the Flourishing Fiction Lab, and where we're going. And I think as we bring in sort of these new measures and these new tools, we also have to have stories about how they've been used. I always talk about people need to see to believe, but this group sort of believes before they see. And I think in order to sort of make these inroads, I don't care what sector you're in, the sectors have to have, they have to have almost a trajectory that they can aim towards. And they say that in the business model context, right? Like cognitively, you have to get everybody on the same page. That's why we use the modeling tools and the visual modeling tools. But I think we need more stories out there, and we need more case studies and conversations. Like, what is possible? If I start to use these tools and I start to use these benchmarks, how do they fit together like Lego bricks, or how do they fit together, language wise and new ways of describing things, right? We need new language. And that's the thing that I actually see is the biggest roadblock is, okay, so we want to have a flourishing theory of change or a flourishing future. Okay. And, I think Simon hit it on best. Okay, but let's go, like, what do we use? Okay, we use the scorecard. But the scorecard has been redacted to such a point now that it doesn't have any meaning anymore, right? And so I think we need to get back to understanding that the tools we're using and the tools we're using to design need to have language. They need to have vision attached to them. And when you're having a conversation about what we're measuring, and somebody says, "Well, I want to change our measures," and they're going like, "Well, why? How is that? Does that mean that at the expense of the fiscal?" No, it means that it's more of a systemic. And, well, who's doing that? Or what's the possibility? And I think that's the biggest roadblock we face. And the more that we can have those stories and that storytelling happening, the better off it will chart for every sector that we're in.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your insight, Nicole. I'd like to also just say thank you so much to Florian, Bill, Simon, and Nicole. That kind of concludes our live interviews. So at this point in time, I'd like to pass the torch back to Lori, who will invite some community reflection.
Okay, well, how do people feel right now? I'd love to hear from you in the chat. My personal reflection is that this has been a group of people who have come together on a pathway for goodening, I think, in a sense of flourishing. I believe that each of the speakers has brought a unique perspective and a unique history to the conversation, and not only the current conversation, but the historical conversation and the future conversation. And I would like to personally thank everybody for participating in the whole time of existence and in the separate things that you do separately from this group, because everyone's working inside and outside of this group.
So maybe we could ask folks to put in the chat reflections on what the group has meant to you and what it could mean for you going forward. And if anybody would like to speak out loud to those two questions, very happy to hear people out loud as well. Kern, maybe I could get you to comment on those two questions. What's the group meant to you, and what could it mean for you going forward? If you unmute yourself.
For me, it was the journey started with meeting you, actually. That was a bit the way I unrolled it, and for me it was a new way for looking at sustainability connected to developing a business. And the ideas I have learned through the workshop you gave, and afterwards through the new ideas that I got through all the presentations within the group, they have been always feeding me with new ideas I could take in further in my journey in growing as a person, and taking those ideas into my daily job as I work for a government, and I try to help others to become more sustainable. So for me, it's a group that was informative, that I got to learn a lot from, and was a nice way to reflect sometimes for myself on how other people thought about other things and how this would combine with the ideas that I personally have. So, and for the future, I really hope this group stays in place, and that it is, it even can how do you say it, stimulate even more new ideas, and follow up all the streams of new ideas that are out there, and try to see how they match with the personal beliefs as a Flourishing Institute, and see how it would combine with the tools we can develop and how they can adapt to new things out in the market. So I think there's still a large work waiting for the Institute, and I hope they can do it, and I hope you find the funding needed for all those things.
Perfect, Koen. Thank you very much. Is anybody else like to comment on those two questions? What's the group meant to you? And if you're new, then you don't have to comment on that. If you want to just talk about what you're hoping the group's going to mean to you going forward, that would be great to hear some comments from somebody who's new.
Elaine, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, well, I am relatively new, but I think what this discussion has done for me, and perhaps the initiatives of this group, is to really differentiate sort of what maybe we have thought sustainability was, and perhaps myself included, and really getting into the strong sustainability, because that difference is crucial. And so I guess I come from a background of education, so I see that more education is needed to transfer or to spread the word on what strong sustainability is, because I think most people have good intentions, but we need more education. And also, I guess, as others have said, at the policy level, maybe at the governmental level, because if ESG can get out the word, we can get out the word. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Elaine. So we do have a few other things to talk about, which is turning our attention to the future. So I want to take this opportunity now to thank all of our speakers, both those who were interviewed formally and Koen and Elaine, who have just shared some comments, and all of you who have been sharing your perspective and comments in the chat, which we will save, by the way. We keep the chat along with the video as a record of our meetings. And I also wanted to make a personal thank you to all of you as members of the group who have contributed so much over the last 10 years to making this group what it is today, and hopefully setting the foundations for how things are going to move going forward. And so with that, thank you. I'd like to turn our attention to some of the opportunities and challenges that several of you have mentioned, and that we also see to set us a framework for thinking about where we're going next with this community. So one problem that we've noticed with all of the initiatives of our members, and even more generally, is that getting funding for applied research and development, for management innovations, for new tools, methods, techniques, is very, very challenging. Most of the research funds that are available in the public sector, for example, are going to business school profs who are still barely weekly sustainable, if not still following the neoclassical microeconomic approach. So we've seen this problem of getting funding for the work of strong sustainability of flourishing as being a significant challenge and therefore a significant opportunity. We also see that this community of I was corrected, it's over 2,400 now, is a fantastic opportunity for all of these initiatives to test these ideas that we're coming up with and get more people involved in the practice than we've managed to do so far. So there's a level of engagement that could be possible that we haven't achieved through the monthly meetings so far that could take us a lot further. There's also a need, once an innovation has come up, that evaluation, that initiative needs to be scaled in order for it to have the impact that it could have. And again, we've seen many initiatives struggling to get to that scale, and we think that there's an opportunity and a challenge around helping folks evaluate the practicality of their initiatives and also to scale them. We also hear from all of you that there's a desire to continue to learn more about what other members are doing. There is an awful lot of work going on in this community, and there's also a strong desire for people to learn about that. There's also a desire to get more involved in flourishing innovations, in the management innovations, in the research and development process. And there's also a desire to develop more relationships with others in adjacent fields with a free exchange of ideas and resources around the world. We've been doing some of that, but clearly when I highlighted the movement for flourishing enterprises earlier, there's a lot more going on out there that are not yet connected with us, and we're not connected with them. So lots of opportunity in that space. So this was a sort of snapshot of where we see ourselves today and the opportunities and the challenges going forward. I'd like to now invite Randy Saad to build on that and start talking about the future a little bit. I should mention that Randy is the acting director, executive director for the Flourishing Enterprise Institute, and I'm speaking now as the acting director of practice and research for the Institute. So, Randy.
Many thanks, Anthony. I have to apologize. I'm actually on holiday at the moment and in transit, no less. So I hope the sound quality is okay. I've just turned on my video for a quick moment, and we'll turn it back off to make sure there's no connectivity issues and that I don't make anyone else car sick. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat a little bit about the FEI. And yeah, it's a pleasure to connect with the whole group. It's been great so far. You know, I think speaking a little bit more personally, given that we're amongst friends, I just wanted to sort of reflect on the opportunity at hand. I think it was highlighted very much in the comment that Bill made in the chat, the reflections that Simon and Nicole offered. And it's really about this potential. We've had this wonderful opportunity as a community of practice, as much as we may not be very tightly stitched together, to connect, to learn from each other, to know that there are others following this same and quite disrupted path towards strong sustainability and flourishing. And the FEI really was about dreaming a new dream. I mean, Anthony came forward with his idea of a new way of understanding businesses and business models, and that's had a tremendous impact, and that's led to this community growing and looking at management innovations more broadly. And I think we're all present to the potential to really bring forward the disruption that we know is necessary. And as part of that, the FEI became a concept or an idea, a dream that became part of the thinking of some of the leaders in this group that began to emerge. It was actually it was first proposed in 2016, I believe, by Dr. Peter Jones, who is part of the SSBMG leadership team. And it was during discussions on the evolution of the SSBMG that he brought forward this idea of creating a formal organization. The initial objective was simply to create something of a more formal organization to support the realization of the SSBMG's vision and mission. And really, it was about providing more credibility, structure, and resources to help accelerate the innovation initiatives of its members. You know, the ideas were exciting, but there wasn't really a clear path forward. And it was around that time, having been a long member and active participant in the monthly meetings, that I saw a connection point and a possibility myself. At the time, I had been involved with Dr. Manuel Reamer, who is part of a really special project that's been happening in Waterloo, Canada, called the Evolve One building. Is, if I can get this correctly, Canada's first certified carbon neutral and net positive energy commercial multi-tenant office building. So being part of a committee there, I got to know Manuel really well, and he's doing some work on the cultural side of the building and looking at transformation in that respect. And as the leader of a research center at Laurier called the Viessmann Center for Engagement in Research and Sustainability, I thought there might be enough of an intersection point between Manuel's interest in cultures of sustainability and our interest in strongly sustainable or flourishing enterprises that we might collaborate. And so I brought forward our ideas, all of the momentum and progress that we had made as the SSBMG, and the possibility of collaboratively working on building an institute that would be in part incubated at Veris. And as a result of those conversations, we eventually presented to Manuel's board with his support and got the momentum and approval we needed to go ahead and apply for some funding to support the inception of the FEI. And so with our many SSBMG supporters and members, as well as our four co-founders in Stephen Davies, Dr. Peter Jones, myself, and Anthony, of course, we were able to secure a Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada Connections grant that allowed us to finance the organization and the coordination of a founding forum. Can you forward the slide, Anthony? Thank you. Perfect. So in August 2019, we hosted a founding forum for the Flourishing Enterprise Institute with Veris at the Evolve One building in Waterloo, Canada. So the event convened a diverse and very forward-thinking group of SSBMG members over 3 days in the Evolve One building. This included 26 esteemed professionals from across the United States, Sweden, Germany, Italy, and 4 Canadian provinces. So there was a 3-day event that was jam-packed and featured a public keynote presentation delivered by world-renowned academic, author, and founder of Appreciative Inquiry, Dr. David Cooper. And at this point, I just want to pause and give Anthony an opportunity to speak a little bit about the original vision that was created as an outcome of that event.
Thanks, Randy. So the original vision for the Institute, which Peter Jones originated and was refined and developed further by the group of folks that Randy has mentioned, with input from everybody at the Flourishing Enterprise Founding Forum. The original vision was for a planetary network of applied research nodes to enable research and development of strongly sustainable innovation, management innovation, social innovation, process innovation, cultural innovation, and really inspired by the exemplary initiatives from the SSBMG members that I introduced earlier. And the idea was this would be not an institute that was located just in one location, perhaps with one professor being in charge of it. We saw this as a network that needed to be responsive to conditions in different places around the world, and therefore needed nodes in different places around the world. And the institute is formed by the together, all of those nodes together form the institute. So we wanted the Institute to catalyze the design and the mobilization of innovations for flourishing, and very specifically as a brand, if you like, a place to gain funding for the required applied research and scaling work, more on the research side of things. And lastly, we wanted it to continue to be a vibrant community of innovators helping to conduct the research and as a source of leaders to scale the work. So very much taking the community that we built using the SSBMG context and bringing that community to be part of the Institute's world as a source of ideas, as a source of places to test, as a source of ideas for new collaborations to form. And also as part of a larger network, this movement for flourishing, we saw the Institute being a useful resource for the entire movement as a place where applied research could be undertaken with this community. Randy.
So as you might have gathered from Anthony sharing, this was an exciting and inspiring time. We walked away from this forum, people showed up from all over the world. We had an exciting vision. There was finally the ground laid to begin building a multinational organization of sorts that would begin to realize this potential that we all felt. But there was a big but. The challenge was in terms of next steps and securing the funding we needed to convene all of the partners as part of building the distributed governance model that we envisioned being so central to the establishment of a proper FEI, and as part of standing up the administration and the operations that would need to be in place in order to work with all of the different partners. We realized we had a bit of a gap. Unfortunately, in the research space, most funders are interested in funding research first, and administrations and organizations that support that research second. And starting on a foundation of little to no research, it was very difficult to find those that were willing and interested in making an upfront investment for the purpose of really building the infrastructure that was needed to do some really important research in the years to come. So it was a bit of a deflating and anticlimactic kind of wake that we sat in after this founding forum, not sure what to do. But what was happening was at least those of us locally in Southern Ontario and within proximity to Toronto had gotten ourselves involved in projects and had began to do practical applied research. And our thought was, well, in the same way that we've kind of created something, learned from it, and continue to develop based on that learning, why don't we just proceed with a single node? We'll just establish the FEI where it sits, shared between Veris at Wilfrid Laurier University and with OCAD University, and see what happens. And it was in this context that some good things began to emerge. So first of all, a bunch of research began to happen in the municipal space amongst several of the SSBMG members and innovations that we're working on, myself included. So firstly, some work that we're doing with the city of Kitchener around enabling municipalities to realize the possibility of flourishing through the transformation of strategic management practices, led to the securing of a Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada Partnership Engage grant, where we studied a process that we led to engage the corporate leadership team of the organization through a series of workshops. The successes that we had there led to the development between myself and Manuel, a larger Canadian partnership called Toward Equity and Accessibility in Municipal Climate Action Planning, which included a variety of partners all interested in testing the same model of adapting strategic management practices across a variety of municipalities across Canada. And so we developed a large partnership, applied for a partnership grant through SSHRC as well. And that led us to a bigger partnership with ICLEI and the ICLEI World Secretariat. And so we've now scaled our pursuit of funding for research and application globally. And the goal is to test many of the innovations that are part of the sphere of the SSBMG with organizations, with municipalities specifically in countries around the world. So this has led to a variety of opportunities as well. But the point is, in all of these conversations, the FEI has become a very important partner as the gateway, as a lead access point to these systems-based management innovations that have been incubated and have become a point of focus within our community. I should also mention the Flourishing Enterprise Competency Model that Anthony and others have been working on as a next innovation to fill a gap that's been identified in leadership and practice. And so all of this leads us to what's next, as we've learned a bunch from our experience leading the FEI out of Waterloo and Toronto, and have come back to our bigger vision and discussed how we can evolve beyond this single node to fulfill on more of the potential that we originally saw. And so what you see here is a little bit of a teaser. In our next meeting, as Anthony has described, we'll be talking a lot more about the community for flourishing enterprises, as well as the future of the Flourishing Enterprise Institute. And what we're seeing is a Flourishing Enterprise Institute that really is a multifaceted organization, where at the center we have systems-based management innovations and innovation initiatives that are helping enterprise leaders and enterprises in general to innovate and to adapt to change. We see something of an accelerator program that's going to enable those organizations to leverage the tools and the methods that some of them are developing. Around that, having applied research so that there is testing and rigorous, credible academic research being accompanying the testing of these innovations in practice such that we develop the evidence and the case studies that are needed to begin to disrupt the mainstream. And outside of that, a practice of movement building. So recognizing that the work that we do within our own community and within the confines of our organization, it needs to link with many other organizations that can and need to benefit from the innovations that are coming forward and some of the work that we're doing. And so that movement building towards flourishing is also a big part of what the organization would do. And of course, we don't plan to make all of these things happen overnight, but this is part of the clarifying vision, or the vision that is clarifying as we go ahead, and we're very excited to engage with the community and discussing it further. Anthony.
So building on the movement side of things, and just very quickly as a teaser for the November the 10th meeting, so that's November the 10th at 11 a.m., 1100 hours Eastern Standard Time, so UTC minus 5, if I'm remembering correctly. We're going to be launching the community for Flourishing Enterprises, the community of the Institute. And we're going to be talking about its purpose, its goals, how it's going to be co-created with all of you, and what will be the benefits. And we'll give some more details about the way that the Institute is evolving. And to that point, given we're right at time, I want to invite all of you to tell us what you would like the community for Flourishing Enterprises to think about, to be for you, how it can add value to you. And so we've developed a survey. The short link is there on the screen right now, bit.ly C4FE-survey. And we would really love you to be filling that out in the next days. And I correct the date there, and it's November the 10th, if I'm getting that correct, not November the 11th. Yes, November the 10th. So it would be really wonderful if folks could look to that survey. Maybe somebody could put that link in the chat. So I know we're over time, but I did want to give the opportunity for questions for anybody who would like to stick around for the next few minutes. We're very happy to stick around to answer questions. If you have to leave now, thank you very much for being here. Hopefully you found this interesting and useful, and looking forward to seeing you all and many more people on November the 10th. So does anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to share at this point?
I just want to thank Anthony and Peter and Nabil and all the people who founded this and created space for us to come together every month and exchange ideas and inspire each other and share knowledge. So holding space is a tough job, especially as a volunteer organization. So I really appreciate all the efforts that's gone into creating this community and keeping it going and flourishing. Congratulations to everybody.
Any other questions or comments?
I'm just reading the chat there, so thank you very much. It was interesting and great to meet everybody. Everything is clear. Thanks so much for the space. What's next? Big thank you to Anthony and all the animators of the community. Looking forward to the next chapter. Thank you, wonderful group. Thank you, congrats. The link to the survey is there. And congratulations to the SSBMG. Thanks to everybody. Great to be a part of this great community, working towards the common goal of researching, developing, and implementing transformations that place civilization on the trajectory towards thrivability. For more on measuring impact of business sector and governance models, visit the Thrive Project, and there's a link.
Any other questions or comments from anybody that they'd like to say out loud? How does our assessment of the situation and our identification of what could be useful going forward to strike you all so far? Does it resonate with you all?
Hello, just answering quickly on that question. I think definitely it resonates. I think that the challenge will be to organize it in a way that everyone can maneuver and move around this community in a way that makes sense for her or him, because it's so much and it will be difficult to organize it everything at the same time for everyone. So I think probably we'll need to look into it, what mechanisms can we organize so that actually all of this can happen at the same time. It's possible for individuals just to move around the community as they need to do for themselves or want to do for themselves. So, and then we can probably even add even more things than what's on the list. It's already a big thing, a big list, but yeah, definitely looking forward to be part of this.
Fantastic. Any other thoughts or comments?
We have a number of people in the chat saying it resonates.
Okay, that's great. Okay, everybody, let's wrap it up there. We've 5 minutes over time. So thank you all again for attending today, and looking forward to seeing all of you on November the 10th at the same time and electronic location.
Same time, depending on which time zone you're in because of the change to standard time. So
Yes.
double check.
double check the timing, exactly. Okay, thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, Anthony. Thanks everyone for attending.